I'm Christie.
And I'm Kathy.
And this is The Psychic
and the Skeptic. Welcome back to The Psychic and the Skeptic. And on this episode, we are talking about earthbound spirits. Ghost stories have been reported for centuries in places where tragedy, violence, or unfinished lives intersect with history. Many believe these are encounters with earthbound spirits, souls that never fully move on.
So one of the things that I get asked all the time is, why are some ghosts earthbound? What keeps ghosts here? So I love this topic because there are some reasons, and one of these reasons is because they may not know that they're dead. So, for example, you take a tragic car accident and the spirit suddenly dies, and they're not aware that they're no longer in their physical body. Some stay because of loved ones who are still here in the physical, who are mourning them, and they feel like they still need to be here. And I've seen this happen where I speak to someone's relative if I'm doing a reading for them. So, for example, a mother who passes away and her children are really upset over her death, and so she feels obligated to stay for her children. Also, you have some of those spirits who, let's say they were raised religiously and they were taught about heaven and hell, and they don't cross over at the time of their death just because they're afraid of what awaits them on the other side. Like, uh-oh, am I going to have a bad life on the other side? Am I going to go down
to the burning pits of hell?
Exactly. And spirits are the same as what we are in life. They each have their own reasons, their own personalities. And so we're going to get into some of these cases, even our own personal ones, and talk about some of these earthbound spirits.
Yeah, it's very interesting about the not knowing that they're dead. Mm-hmm. And we've had some EVPs that kind of point towards that, which is where some of this theory comes from, at least from our perspective as paranormal investigators. And we often get these answers through these EVPs. So this is why we do a lot of our EVP sessions, asking, do you even know that you've passed? You get psychic impressions from communication psychically from spirits that lead you to some of these reasons on why something is earthbound. But essentially, earthbound meaning that they're trapped here, right? That they're not in heaven, they're not in hell, they're not in purgatory like a Catholic might question.
No, they're in this earthly realm.
But are these experiences evidence of spirits, or are they simply a way that human memory, expectation, and environment interact with our senses? Because this is the skeptic viewpoint. So we're going to talk about a lot of the history and where all this comes from, because this, goes all the way back. What are some stories, some famous cases that maybe if you're a paranormal enthusiast, you've seen and heard some shows and some history on some paranormal locations? And what, if anything, is there science or logic behind some of these experiences or the idea of earthbound spirits?
And do you remember, I don't know if you remember that EVP that we got. I don't think you were on this investigation, actually. It was recorded at the Ritz Theater in Shawnee, Oklahoma. But we got a man's voice. And he says, "Are we dead?"
Correct. Yeah,
and I know you've heard that.
Yes, because we share that one when we do presentations and give samples of EVPs that we've played.
Yeah. So they may not know that they're actually dead. Should we play that one?
Yeah, we
to
can
get
play
this
that
episode
one.
started.
Let's dig that one up and play it for our audience.
Let's do that.
What a great way to start this episode.
Exactly.
A clear, I would say, probably Class A EVP of somebody who's confused. Sometimes it's hard to know in these EVPs if they're talking about themselves or others, but this one is, he says we, are we dead? Who is he talking to? Are there other spirits there with him? I don't know. But
well, apparently there has to be, because he said we.
Right. So is he talking about everybody investigating in him, or is he talking about, I've always wondered that about that EVP.
I think he's talking about the spirits that are around him.
Yeah.
You know,
And you were there, so knowing were there other spirits, did you pick up on multiple at that particular investigation?
Yes.
So.
We did actually, because above the theater there was this, it was a 2-story building. So you had this boarding house that was above it where people used to stay and sometimes come in and rent and then go. So, yeah.
Very interesting. So this, like we were saying, is older than most civilizations when we're talking about the belief that spirits could remain among the living, trapped here in Earthbound. So, what does that mean? It's
History time.
So, of course, we cannot start this particular episode without discussing the ancient historical references to earthbound spirits, starting with ancient Greece and Rome. So, the idea of spirits lingering on Earth goes back thousands of years into ancient Greece, and restless spirits were called acheron spirits or ataphoi, meaning those who had not received a proper burial because they had certain rights and requirements.
A lot of people thought that if someone didn't get a proper burial, that would actually keep them earthbound.
Right, exactly. And that was their belief in ancient Greece. The historian Pliny the Younger even recorded one of the earliest ghost stories in a letter describing a haunted house in Athens. The story involved a philosopher named Athendros Canaanites who rented a house where residents reported chains rattling at night, and according to the account, a ghost appeared and led him to a buried skeleton that had not been properly buried. Once the remains were given proper funeral rites, the hauntings had stopped. Now, power suggestion maybe. The placebo effect, in my opinion. But anyways, from a metaphysical perspective, this fits the idea of an earthbound spirit unable to move on due to unfinished burial rites, like you were saying. Mm-hmm. But historians view this story a little bit differently. Ancient ghost stories often serve as moral or cultural lessons about respecting burial customs. So was this a story that was shared to teach about what's proper, what's tradition?
Do it.
Much of what we've talked about with other traditions, with other paranormal topics on this podcast.
Things were done to teach a lesson, basically.
Right. Yes, and of course this is legend. Mm-hmm. So it's possible the noises were simply normal nighttime sounds in an old building, later interpreted through superstition, which we know was clearly evident at that time.
Right.
And in Japan, the concept of restless spirits appears in Shinto and Buddhist traditions. These spirits are called yurei and believed to remain when someone dies when intense emotions like anger, betrayal, or grief occur. Many Japanese ghost legends describe spirits bound to locations where tragic events occurred.
Sounds more like a residual imprint to me.
Exactly. And very much like what we believe here, too.
Mm-hmm.
So anthropologists believe that these stories helped communities process grief and unexplained tragedies before modern science provided explanations. They also reinforce cultural values surrounding proper mourning rituals.
Again, teaching those lessons.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And Haitian voodoo spirits are believed to transition through stages after death. The Guédé-Lois govern the realm of the dead and help guide spirits between the worlds, which we talked about.
Yes, this is that type of spirit that we mentioned in our spiritual attachments episode.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So some traditions describe spirits temporarily remaining among the living before fully transitioning. And anthropologists often interpret these beliefs as part of cultural systems designed to explain death and maintain connections with ancestors. And lastly, archaeologists have discovered that ancient Egyptian texts called letters to the dead were messages written by the living asking deceased relatives to stop causing illness or bad luck.
Oh, that's interesting.
So they buried their dead with riches and relics and all these things that they thought they would need in the afterlife, and also sent them letters. Hey, leave us alone over here in the living and make sure that you don't curse us or cause illness or bad luck.
That means they had a fear then, even if it's your relative.
Right.
They had a fear that the relative would come back and do something. Right. And that's interesting. That's brought
up. Where
up.
did this come from? This was because, or it's thought to believe that they had already experienced maybe some paranormal activity. They already believed that the dead might linger among the living because maybe they saw things or maybe they felt things. And so they thought this was their ancestors causing paranormal activities, which led to these letters to the dead.
Yeah, and in today's thoughts, a lot of people, when they're being haunted, may think that it is a relative.
Right.
And most of the time, in my experience, I have found that it's not normally the relatives that are creating the haunting. And I'm sure you can back that up as far as some of the evidence and cases that we've done. Now, they may come around and they may say, hey, this is me, or they try to get attention, but they don't do it in a way that creates some sort of severe haunting, or like this haunting where they're scaring the family members that live there.
I would say that most of the time on a residential case, I do the history on who lived there, were there any tragic events that happened that could lead to some kind of imprint on the environment, whether it's residual or maybe somebody who's trapped there and earthbound. That's really the main reason why I do the historical research before we go in, just to have that background information for that potential. And then we go on an investigation, and whoever you connect with psychically turns out not to be anybody attached to the property. It usually somebody attached to the person who lives there, like a relative. So you're saying that's not that common?
No, what I'm trying to say is that you have some cases where they're like, oh my gosh, all hell's breaking loose. And normally it is some sort of earthbound spirit that is causing that. Now,
Oh, so you're saying most people think it's demonic when it ends up being an earthbound spirit?
or some sort of bad spirit, yes. But I will tell you, if a person's relative has not crossed over yet, they are earthbound. They can tend to be more chaotic, yes, or create that haunting because they carry with them all of those physical ailments or emotions or thoughts that they had in life. Whereas,
and the longer they stay earthbound, you've said before, the more restless they become. Yes.
and depending upon their state of mind, also the more they can start to hate the living because they are not living.
And assuming that's true, that would be very hard for a family member to see a loved one trapped earthbound that's going through turmoil.
Correct. And there is a difference between the earthbound and the transcendent.
Right, because that's also another thing. We've had clients that we've investigated that seem just open, and we know that can attract spirit like transcendent or transients just passing through, needing attention or needing a message.
Right. And I'll tell you, they know. Spirits know when there is a person around who is able to see, to hear, maybe possibly communicate with them. Now, they may not know all the gifts that person has, but if the best way I can describe it is if you were to put yourself in a darker room. And I know you've heard me tell this example before, but you put yourself in a darker room and you have a light, a flashlight, a lantern, whatever it may be. And when you turn on that flashlight at night, and this summer, by the way, because in the winter all the bugs are dead, but in the summer, you know how you'll have a bunch of bugs, moths, and stuff that come to that light. So
Go to the light.
Go to the light, Pollyanna. But anyway, symbolically, psychics are that light, and those spirits are like the moths. So we give off this beacon of light, and spirits will see that light. And if they're in an earthbound state, or if they're in that state where they need help, they will go to that light, not always knowing the extent of the person's gifts. Now, the stronger a person is psychically with their gifts, the brighter their light shines. And this is one of those theories that I know to be true, and I've seen it, not just with myself, but working with other psychics. So example, when we've been on investigations with API, and we have a couple that are sensitive, you put that together, it seems like we have more activity.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's like the rest of us investigators are just sitting here watching the psychic show.
Oh, is somebody upset about that?
No,
Sounds to me.
it's pretty cool, actually, because we've separated you all. And you all have come up with a very similar claim of who you're speaking to and describe the same person, even though we know you hadn't corroborated and come together to explain what you've seen. So
But
it's
also,
interesting and head scratching and difficult for a skeptic, but I will say we've seen that time and time again.
yes, and that when you said that, it made me think about Jill on our last residential investigation that we went on. Hi, Jill, by the way, because she listens every week. But when we were in the residential, we were in the bedroom of one of the ladies that lived there, and she was the one that was experiencing most of the activity. She is an elderly lady, and so I started to describe some stuff that I was picking up on, and Jill makes this comment. I can't remember her words, but it was something like, "Oh, dang, Christie," and I'm like, "What, Jill? You know how this works." And I had to laugh because of her comment, like almost like she was in disbelief that I had got that information and put it out there. So anyway, so this is how it works. You put off that light, it attracts those spirits. And the more lights that you have together, the more potential for activity.
And the stronger the pull from spirits that are lingering out there.
Yes.
So we'll get spirits who are talking with you that have nothing to do with the property, the location, or the claims. They just happen to see this light. So we get some random spirits that we can't connect to anything with the location. Mm-hmm. And I think it's that beacon that's pulled them there.
That is correct. Like Kendalls Revisited.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
When we had Sam. That's a case that I'll talk about a little bit later on, but
Sure.
he was the exact example of that.
An earthbound spirit trapped,
Correct.
looking for a way out, perhaps, or
Looking
a
for some
solution
help.
or an answer to what they're experiencing.
Right. And I will tell you, I know you made that little comment, "Oh, it's a psychic show." That was funny, actually. But you are able to get some evidence recorded, though, aren't you, Miss Skeptic?
Well, I mean, we've had some interesting recordings, but
You're welcome for all of us who work
again,
really hard.
A lot of this stuff with this episode, it really is all encompassing of paranormal. Earthbound spirits are what we're seeking when we're out there investigating for the most part. I know we have other types of spirits and other types of paranormal entities that we've covered in other episodes, but this in particular is a big one. So we could spend all day on this.
Oh, yeah.
But we've got some examples that come up, just some cases that are more well known and more popular from most people who follow paranormal activities and stories. Mm-hmm. Before we get into those, when we go on an investigation, Christy, how do you know which ones are earthbound and which ones are not?
Oh, good question. I know that you've heard me talk before about the frequency levels, the vibration levels. So with an earthbound spirit, how I recognize them is they have a very heavy vibration, and it's almost to that point where the difference between them and the transcended is, the best way I can describe it, I think, is if you were to put a lot of pressure on your shoulders, like your shoulders are weighted down.
And this is how you
Yes,
receive that communication.
correct. But I feel it more so in like my belly area, the abdomen. It just feels like a really heavy energy. Now, transcended,
And what do you mean by transcendent?
they're not earthbound. They have already crossed over, and they come back to this plane for various reasons. It could be to help a loved one, to guide them. It could be for getting a message across briefly to someone. So they have their different reasons. But earthbound spirits, it's not just because of unfinished business. They could actually be stuck here because, again, they don't know that they're dead. They fear what's on the other side. Some sort of reason, like maybe family, is keeping them here. And then I'll talk about Pamela here in a little bit.
And family would keep them here because they're worried about them, right?
Correct.
They're afraid to leave them and not be able to reach them somehow to help guide them.
That can be a reason, yes. They feel obligated in some sort of way.
They weren't done. Unfinished business with family too, right?
In a sense, I guess you could say.
Or it probably depends on the case.
Correct. It's going to be a case-by-case basis. So, and speaking of cases, we could get into some of these.
So some examples of where you might encounter an earthbound spirit. For one, Eastern State Penitentiary. Now, if you watch any of the paranormal shows, they're always visiting. And Eastern State Penitentiary actually has a lot of ghost tours. And They have a Facebook page if you're interested in following them and all their events and what they have going on. But few places feel more haunted than abandoned prisons. So it's not quite abandoned now. It's just no longer a prison. Now they run all these tours. It's more like a museum.
But you can imagine not only intelligent, I believe, that can be there, but also residual. Can you imagine the residual emotion and energy that is
Imprinted.
left in a prison?
And
wow.
what traps energy there? Is it what they use to build their walls? Maybe the metal bars? Just trying to theorize why prisons.
I really do believe that, let's say a prisoner was put to death and they don't necessarily realize fully that they're dead. They're like, wait a second, I just went through this ordeal, but here I am still.
They lived in a Groundhog Day, basically in prison.
In a sense.
So it's hard to probably escape that kind of psychosis in a sense. Even after death, their mind is still trapped. If your body was trapped, your mind gets trapped.
Yes. Even though I think when a person dies, I do believe that there is a light, an opening where they can cross over. But I do believe that depending upon the state of their mind, their body, maybe they don't always see that light, or when they see it, they don't know what it is, and so they don't go through it. And the theory is out there, that white light, which is that portal, it's that doorway, stays around for about a week after someone dies, and then it'll go away. And then in order for that spirit to find that light again, they have to look in different places, have someone who does spirit work like psychics open that back up for them. I mean, there's lots of theories on that.
Eastern State was built in 1829, and it had a brutal system of solitary confinement. So prisoners spent nearly every hour alone in their cells. Many developed severe psychological problems. And today, visitors report whispers, shadow figures, footsteps, echoing. There's really cool, seemingly residual type shadows that have been captured from some of the paranormal investigators that have shows out there.
Or are we going to analyze some video, Kathy?
Not necessarily this time, but some investigators believe that this intense suffering that they experienced is what caused this imprintation, leaving spiritual energy trapped within the walls. Now that explains more of a residual type haunting.
Intelligent though too.
Right. You don't know if it's intelligent or residual until you get some interaction with it.
Correct.
So a lot of these claims like shadows and footsteps aren't really communicating with them. They're just that imprint. But solitary confinement has been known to cause hallucinations and extreme psychological distress. So it's possible these stories of hauntings grew from real suffering of prisoners' experiences while they were there. If any of this is true paranormal activity, it's probably more likely residual with the occasional intelligent in there, which seems to be more uncommon as a type of paranormal.
And I could agree with that. I've never been to Eastern State Pen. It is on my bucket list, but I would want to go there and be able to get some sort of recorded evidence to say for sure if it's intelligent or residual. Just like the EVP we played at the beginning, are we dead?
Right.
To me, that's going to give me proof that, there's an intelligent.
It's assessing the environment and showing confusion. Or it could be, you could look at it, that's really hard to determine intelligent versus residual, because even the are we dead could have been something that spirit experienced at the moment of their death and it imprinted into the environment. So the interaction and the conversation in direct response to the living likely points more towards the intelligent type haunting. And then there's the determination, is this an earthbound spirit or somebody who's here temporarily to communicate with us?
Right, because I don't feel like you're going to get any recorded evidence that says, hey, I'm an earthbound spirit, or hey, I'm a transcendent spirit, I've just come back. No, you're not going to get that.
But what the prison represents is the type of location where enough turmoil has occurred that increases the likelihood that somebody's trapped earthbound.
Oh, sure. Yeah, for sure.
So another case that we could look at is the famous Myrtles Plantation.
Oh, I really want to go here as well. I absolutely love this. I have done extensive research on Myrtles Plantation, and this plantation is very old. Its history starts about 1796 with General David Bradford. Now, he was trying to escape the Whiskey Rebellion So he had this plantation built, and he named his home Laurel Grove. So it wasn't always known as Myrtles. Now, General Bradford did marry, had children. He had a daughter named Sarah Matilda Bradford. And this is where Myrtle's history starts to come in, because she married a guy named Clark Woodruff, and they began a family. Now, Clark and Sarah had 2 children, 1 boy and 1 girl. Now, during this time, and Myrtles is in the South, okay? So slavery did take place.
Plantation, yeah.
Yes. So slavery was going on during this time, and supposedly there was a house slave by the name of Chloe, and legend says that she had a really bad habit of eavesdropping in on private conversations that Mr. Woodruff had with others in his parlor. So one day she was caught eavesdropping, and what Clark did was he went in for punishment and he cut off her left ear. Ouch.
Yeah. Oof.
So I know, right? But due to this deformity, it's said that Chloe would wear this green turban around her head to be able to hide her ear, that injury to her ear.
Yeah.
Now, explicit little warning right here. But this legend also states that Chloe was forced to have relations with Clark Woodruff against her will. So, moving forward, Chloe was really afraid that Clark was going to remove her from her house duties and put her out in the fields to work, which if you were a slave back then, you did not want to be working out in the fields.
Yeah, no, in the South with the heat. Ooh.
Oh, yeah. But it was harder work. It was more of that manual labor.
Yeah.
So if you were in the house working in some form, you were considered more privileged.
Right.
So she was afraid that due to what she had done with the eavesdropping, that Clark was going to throw her out in the fields. And she didn't want that to happen. So she came up with this plan that she would show her worth and her value, and she would nurse the Woodruff family back to health. But by doing that, what she had to do is she was going to bake a cake. She took these white oleander leaves, mixed them in with the cake, which was supposed to make Sarah, the wife, and the 2 children sick. And Mr. Woodruff as well, but he never ate the cake. But Sarah and her 2 children did. But Chloe had accidentally, supposedly, put too much of the poison in, and it killed them. So
she wanted them to get sick so that she could be the hero and nurse them back to health.
Correct.
And keep her job inside the house. Because
Correct.
she's clearly needed, right?
yes.
Ugh.
But she overdid it on the oleander poison, and it ended up killing Sarah and the 2 children. Now, fearing retribution, the other enslaved people supposedly hanged Chloe and then threw her body into the Mississippi River because they didn't want to get in trouble for what she did. Now,
I wonder how close that is to the river. That house.
I don't know. That's a good question. I've done research on this and
Throw her in the river.
let the fish get her. It sounds like something like The Godfather would do.
I know. And my point is, it just sounds like urban legend. Mm-hmm.
Well, and this legend has been around for a very long time because I remember even when I first started investigating, hearing about Myrtles Plantation. So now I would like to hear the skeptic side of things here in a second, but I want to mention this photograph, and this will be one that I will also put on our Facebook and Instagram. Now, there's actually 2 photos.
Right.
This first photo, you see the plantation, and then you see off in the corner what appears to be this woman in period clothing, like this dress, and she's pretty dark, but then you see something which could represent a turban on the top of her head. And if I'm not mistaken, I do believe that a visitor to the Myrtles Plantation took this photograph. And of course, visitors that have come to Myrtles have also reported seeing this same woman.
So the photo that you're talking about appears to be from a newspaper clipping, because if you zoom into the photo, you can see the dots much like how it's printed in a newspaper. Mm-hmm. So some of that kind of distorts the image a little bit and makes it hard to discern, because it creates this pattern, and you can see the same pattern throughout any of the dark areas. I took a photography class in black and white photography, and how you get a good image is having contrast between the light white and the dark black in the photo. And so there is some good contrast here, but because it's all one color and different shades of black and white, you're going to see things that mix in and create what we call the pareidolia effect, which I've talked about 100 times when it comes to photographs.
Oh, yeah.
But when you look at the photograph, you can see a darkened area that looks like her arm and maybe part of her face, which would represent dark skin and the enslaved people at the time. It matches very much with some other dark areas in the bushes that are nearby her. They're the same color. So this could mean that there's some foliage, some vines going up the house, or something that can give the same color, but happens to be in the shape that our brains are trying to interpret as something familiar, like a human body.
Like pareidolia.
Exactly. That is what that is.
Yeah.
But you also see the slats of the wood going right through her, which I know people say ghosts are transparent. So maybe that's what this is. But it's already not a very quality photo because it's a picture of a photo in the newspaper. So it's a picture of a picture with the pixelation of the newspaper print. And I don't see a turban. I see some little dot on the top of her head, but I mean, it's not a clear photo anyway, so you're not going to get a clear image.
And this photograph of supposedly Chloe was taken in 1992 by Tita Moss, who had just purchased this Louisiana plantation. And she was actually taking this picture for insurance purposes and then happened to get this figure supposedly of Chloe.
Which again proves my point on photographs that are not evidence of paranormal activity, because if there was an apparition there and she captured it with this picture, she would have seen it with her eyes, because cameras that are used for everyday purposes are not retrofitted for full spectrum like infrared and ultraviolet, where we wouldn't be able to see these things, yet they would show up in a photograph. So her camera is probably a standard 35 millimeter at the time, what we were using back in the 90s.
Yeah, digital really wasn't out that much back then.
And it wasn't out at all. Yeah, that was the early 2000s, I believe, very late 90s.
I remember those days.
But
35 point and shoot developed.
So she probably had to take actual negatives and get those developed. So those cameras are not going to capture everything that our eyes can see. It actually is very slightly limited. So whatever she captured was there that she should have been able to see with her own eyes.
And I will say, yes, and I agree with that, to be honest. And I will say that the one photo that you're talking about being published is, of course, a republication of the original photo. Because the original photo, when you look at it, it doesn't look like the newspaper version. But I will post both of these on our Facebook and our Instagram page. So there is another photo, because supposedly the children also died. But in this second photograph, of course, visitors were there at Myrtles Plantation, snapping pictures. And one was taken in the mirror. And if you look at it, on the left-hand side is what appears to be like the front part of a little girl. So you can see her face, her shoulders, part of her bodice. But anyway, that was one of the photos.
Right. And that one, because it's a mirror and it's an antique mirror, it has that discoloration behind the glass, that metal that was back there to cause reflection.
Right.
It's darkened in areas, and you can see other spots like I talked about with that first photo where the contrast is there between the dark and the light, and certain shapes are odd shapes, and our brain's going to try to interpret them. It clearly looks like a girl with little curls, but that's just the shape of the darkening of the mirror.
And I think they're trying to say that this is possibly Cornelia, which was the Woodruff's daughter.
And if you look at the doorway that's reflecting in that image too, you've got the similar colors on either side, and then the marbling and the gray and the black in there is commonly seen on those mirrors. So if you're familiar with antique mirrors and you look at them up closely, it's going to have patterns and color shapes like these. So it's just,
for sure,
when you zoom in on a pixelated photo that's not very clear, this is the kind of effect you're going to see.
And the last little photo was taken by a visitor in the yard. Left-hand side, by the side of the tree, you see what appears to be a little girl.
Yeah.
So
same thing. And it's hard to know. And this is why it's difficult for paranormal teams when we get photos sent in to us, because we weren't there to see what that could potentially look like. If there's something in the yard that takes the shape of a human form and in an unclear, unfocused photograph, it's hard to know what to compare it with. That's why when we go back to a location, if a client sends us a photo, we go to that area to see, is there something there that could be interpreted as something different in a photograph.
Right, and try to recreate it through that photograph.
Right. It's difficult to do, and there's so many different effects that can happen in photography.
Oh, for sure. And I know you're not a big photograph girl.
Yeah.
And I've done the research on all of Myrtles and stuff, and I know you have too. So do you want to give us kind of the conclusion of Myrtles about Chloe and the family and all that?
And we were alluding to that when we were talking about the legend and throwing the Mississippi River. It sounds just like what all the other urban legends would say. But there's no historical evidence that Chloe ever existed. So some of what we try to do when we do our own historical research is digging into the documents and the records, like census records and things like that.
And that was going to be my question. How do we know that the slaves just weren't documented?
Census records would keep track of her. And it depends on what state and what decade the census was taken, because sometimes they just counted them as numbers and sometimes they had them listed by name. Mm-hmm. If she was a household slave, she might have been listed by name. But there's other records, property records, tax records, personal family papers, and there's no mention of an enslaved person named Chloe. So the legend likely originated in the 1950s or the 1970s to increase interest in the plantation as it was converted into a bed and breakfast. So anytime there's opportunity for making any money on a location, stories tend to come out around that time.
Slap a ghost in there and a lot of people want to come see it.
Yes. Also, the legend claims that Chloe poisoned Sarah and her children with the oleander-laced cake, but historical records show that Sarah and her children actually died of yellow fever. And that was several weeks or even months apart from each other.
Yeah, I think Sarah died of yellow fever in 1823, and then about a year later is when her two children, Cornelia and James, died.
So it wasn't all at the same time from any one cake poisoning.
Yeah.
And then the story with Chloe being hanged for her crime, the only verifiable murder on the property was the murder of William Drew Winter in 1871. So following the Civil War, the owners hired this guy as the agent and lawyer to help manage the family's various plantation lands. So in exchange, the family that lived there was given Myrtles as their residence. And so he was there teaching a Sunday school lesson in the house, and he heard someone approach the property on horseback. When he went out onto the side porch area, the same spot where we have that other apparition supposed photo of Chloe, when he went out to that porch area to meet a stranger, he was shot in the chest. So if Chloe didn't exist, are we looking at Mr. Winter?
Maybe, but maybe he's wearing a dress.
Right. But there's so many other things in the photograph that you can see. The dress matches the pattern in like the fencing and all kinds of things. But,
right.
So I'm just saying, maybe it's not Chloe. It could be him if you actually see a true apparition in that area. Because he's the only murder on that property. And they never caught the guy. There was a suspect, but there aren't any court records that this suspect stood trial. So it never got to court.
No
I guess
DNA
they didn't have
either.
enough evidence to prove it was him, or you know. So those kind of stories lead potential in there being an earthbound spirit still lingering because of some unsolved drama when they were living.
Correct.
So is it Chloe that's the earthbound spirit on Myrtles Plantation? She doesn't seem to have existed, but there's somebody else who's more likely, according to the history.
And even Sarah and her two children, that's documented that they lived and died there. So it could, they could be there.
But it was from yellow fever, not from this Chloe girl. So why do these stories always come about as some nanny that poisons the children? Because we know there's a story at the Stone Lion Inn, a very similar type story about a poisoning that is not corroborated in the history. But it seems to be a legend that's twisted and turned depending on what location you're looking at.
Maybe it just is because it's just an interesting, I don't know, an interesting twist on a story.
Everybody loves drama,
idea.
Right? We all love the drama situation. Blame it on the babysitter.
Yeah, it's
the
like
evil
who done it?
nanny.
Let's move on to our next case. So this one is going to be the Winchester Mystery House.
Ah, yes. The Mystery Funhouse.
Yes. And this is very interesting in the fact that it's still around. It's in California. And it is one of the strangest mansions ever built. So to give a little bit of history about that, it was built by Sarah Winchester. She was the widow of the rifle manufacturer of William Winchester. So what happened was Sarah lived in a different location with her husband. Her husband passed away. And then Sarah was very much into spiritualism. She had this medium tell her that she was going to be punished unless she built a house for these spirits. So she goes and starts to build this house. And it's really strange because there's staircases that lead to nowhere, doors that open into walls, strange twisted hallways. Like, it makes no sense.
Yet she had this constructed this way to confuse the spirits.
Yes.
And
to try to keep them from coming in the actual places where she resides.
She was living, right.
Correct.
To keep them from getting to her. And the construction needed to be continual. Anytime she stopped construction, that's when problems would happen. So she had to continually have a project working on at all times, or she would die.
Right. And that psychic supposedly told her that all these spirits that were haunting her were those that were killed by the Winchester rifles, which is not true.
So
I can't even believe she believed that.
Yeah. What was the motive for this? Because clearly this person wasn't picking up on
mental illness,
perhaps, or maybe she just didn't. Maybe she had a loved one that died from
by the Winchester,
a gunshot of a Winchester rifle. And she found out that this woman is the wife of the guy who invented it. So she's going to get at her and really mess with her mind.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked.
Now, I don't think this house was at all haunted. I think what happened is Sarah was very much into seances and spiritualism. So
she took that reading too
She
hard.
did. And she would actually conduct nightly seances in this one specific room where she would try to communicate with spirits. And this room featured a hidden one-way entrance into the room. And she tried to confuse them, like you said, by building this crazy
labyrinth.
Yes. Now, visitors still to this day come there and they report paranormal things happening. But I think every time she conducted a seance, she opened up a door and let spirits in. But visitors report cold spots, strange sounds, apparitions, to include Sarah herself, some worker named Clyde, and that doors and windows will open and close on their own. And so this Clyde guy is supposedly a construction worker, by the way. And anyway, there's footsteps, hurts, all sorts of crazy things that happen here.
Well, you have like doors that are unnecessary and windows in places. So I can see wind blowing through, causing things to move, all things that can be explained.
Yeah, for sure. So I don't know. Whatever she was pulling through these seances, could there be an earthbound spirit in there? Possibly. But
No,
Sarah herself,
I would say, like, she's probably more the earthbound spirit if there's
Yes.
anything going on there.
That's what I was getting to. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think she is. And I think that's only because I believe she was confused in life and most likely was confused in death. And maybe even, I don't know, did she suffer from some mental illness? Like after her husband's death, after what the psychic told her, it just threw her over the edge? Possibility.
She was so afraid of dying, she kept this construction going on
Yes.
for 40 years. And so maybe that fear keeps her trapped.
Yes. And she also lost her child too, by the way. She lost her husband and her child. And so that's enough. Think about the grief
Yeah.
and the loss. That's enough to drive anybody over the edge. You know what I
Well,
mean?
and in desperation with
Yes.
this reading too. So it's probably ineffective coping and grief that she's dealing with in life.
Which could keep her earthbound.
Exactly.
Yes.
So she's a great example of a potential earthbound spirit.
Yes. I think the house is cool. Would I want to investigate there? Probably not.
Yeah, it's more of a novelty type house. And it's real gorgeous on the outside. The colors are nice. The current caretakers are doing a great job with it.
Oh, they are. Absolutely. And so we just gave some of these examples of these cases.
Yeah, maybe you've heard of some of these places. And
Oh, yeah.
This is how we connect that to potential for earthbound.
Right.
So now we're going to get into some examples of earthbound spirits that we've encountered while investigating with the OKPRI team.
Yeah, and I'm going to go off of memory from a lot of these, but...
Oh yeah, there's probably so many.
Yes, one you will remember right off the bat. This was our last visit to Kendalls.
Right, Kendalls Revisited. Mm-hmm.
Correct.
We have an episode on this too, so if you haven't heard that episode, highly recommend you going back into our files on the podcast and
our
look
case
at
files.
Kendalls Revisited.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So the spirit that I want to talk about, this earthbound spirit, his name was Sam, and we were investigating, and Sam has nothing to do with Kendalls, but I heard him say, "She killed me," this man's voice, and I was like, "What?" And so I was like,
Right,
okay.
and we know this location, and there's not a murder that necessarily occurred there.
No, but I've never felt his energy there before
Right,
either.
we've been there I don't know how many times.
Oh yeah, a ton.
And so this is a great example of an earthbound that's also a transient that was drawn there from that
light
beacon that you mentioned.
And so I was like, all right, let me see what this is all about. And we did a sit down, and Sam began to tell me his story. He lived in California, and he was married, had a couple of daughters. His wife had some sort of mental illness. Either she was bipolar, schizophrenic, but she would go in these bouts of rage. And one day she had a really bad episode, and he told me that he wanted to take her to the hospital. The wife did not want to go, but he forced her into the car, and he showed me a 1973 pea green Chevelle very clearly in my mind. So he gets her in the car, and they're driving, and of course this is California. They're along some sort of rocky cliffside, and the image was really gruesome that he showed me. But his wife, as they're sitting there arguing, his wife reaches over and had apparently grabbed a kitchen knife without him knowing before they left their house. But she starts stabbing him repeatedly in the chest. So he's caught off guard. He's in pain and loses control of the car, which goes over the cliff to their death. Sam was still around because he was really worried about his wife finding him. He did want to be reconnected with loved ones. He was especially looking for his daughters, but he did not want to cross over at the time because he was afraid that he would encounter his wife, and he didn't want to have to go through that again. So
he had several things. He had worry about his children, who are likely still living, trapping him there. And he had fear of the other side. But if she murdered him, which side would she be on?
Well, that depends on how you view things.
And why did he think he was following her?
Right. No, he wasn't following her at all. But he was afraid that if he crossed, she might be there and he would be waiting on him.
Right.
And he didn't want to take that chance. So there was some confusion with Sam. But don't you remember when we did this investigation, we had a lot of correlating evidence on our yes-no pod? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So I felt really sorry for him, and I decided that I was going to help him find that light, that doorway, and to cross over. But with Sam, I knew he was earthbound again. His energy felt very heavy. I could tell from his story that he hadn't found the peace that he needed. But he's going to be one of those that sticks with me for a long time. Like one of my favorite earthbounds, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, you were really into it at the time, too.
Oh, yeah.
So what other earthbound spirits do you have?
There's this next one called Mark. He's from our Nakoma Park investigation, and this was before you joined. This was like way back, I think, 2002. So it's Nakoma Park, Oklahoma. There was a residential investigation. We were in the kitchen doing a sit down. I saw this man peek his head up around, and I felt like we needed to go into that front bedroom. So we did, and I'll never forget, because I'm also empathic in the sense that I can feel different things that the spirits allow me to feel. And I remember us setting our chairs in there, and I had leaned forward I got up out of my chair, leaned forward, and I went to go get my drink, and then I was going to sit back down. As I leaned forward, I felt this sharp shooting pain on the back right side of my back. I believe it was the right side. And I automatically knew how this man had died. And I say it out loud. He was killed. He was stabbed in the back. So we sit back down. I start to get in communication with this man. At the time, I didn't know his name. But all of a sudden, I saw this room change. And it was suddenly now August of 1977. It was daytime. I could see the curtains blowing in the breezes. I could feel the sticky hot heat of summer. And there was this man. He was blondie brown haired, about shoulder length, no shirt, pair of cut off jeans. And I seen him stretching, and he was getting ready to lay down in bed. And then right before he was able to fully lay down in bed, I saw this hand with a knife, and I seen it stabbing him repeatedly in the back. There's a lot of stabbing going on.
I was just thinking the same thing.
See, I knew that.
Call me psychic. Maybe I'm psychic.
Maybe. But anyway, I seen Mark fall forward, and then the way that he fell is he was laying on his stomach on the bed, and then his right arm was dangling off the bed, and I could see blood starting to puddle on the floor. Then he showed me a set of these beautiful little baby blue eyes, like really up close, and I thought, wow, that was weird. Okay. Then all of a sudden in the doorway, I got a vision of this little toddler, probably, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years old, running by the doorway. And the toddler didn't have on any clothes, just a diaper. And so the toddler turns around and comes back in there and goes up to Mark and starts shaking his arm, saying, Daddy, Daddy, Dad, Dad, wanting his dad's attention. And then I see Mark in spirit right outside of his body, and he's reaching out to his son. And he's saying, Daddy's here, son, Daddy's here. And at that moment in time, I felt everything that Mark was feeling, all of his emotions, all of his sadness. He knew he was dead. He knew that he had been murdered. And all he wanted to do was to physically hold his son. I was so emotional that we had to stop the sit down, and I had to go take a break outside.
Yeah. I can feel your emotions and see your emotions now and recalling the story.
Imagine being there with me then.
Right, which is so compelling because this isn't stuff that you just make up.
No.
You can't fake these kind of emotions.
No.
And so something was communicating with you at that time.
Absolutely. And Mark's energy was heavy, just like,
the same pattern. That's
yes.
how you learn your Earthbounds, is you see these patterns. And that story I remember you telling me that story. And so that one has stayed with you over 20 years.
Oh, yes. Oh, gosh.
And it's influenced how you read other spirits stuck and Earthbound, and probably helps solidify the theory that we have on these different paranormal events, occurrences, spirits, Earthbound, all kinds. It's these patterns we see in these investigations, and the emotions you feel from them too.
Yeah, and like you said, it helped me to recognize the Earthbound energies, because at first, since I'm not like taught by any well-known psychic, I had to learn all this stuff on my own, like what this meant. And so I will never forget the case with Mark. And just so you know, I did figure out what happened to him. I found out who murdered him. There was a young girl down the road. There was there's a lot of mental health issues in this episode too.
I know. And I think we need to make it clear that just because somebody has a mental health issue doesn't mean they're a murderer either.
Oh, correct.
We clearly know that this, and you and I both work in healthcare and mental health. And we know that's not typical. It's not common, but it can happen.
Correct. And this young girl, her name was Alicia. She was, 17 or 18. She wanted Mark to get with her and leave his wife and his son, and he didn't want to. So she just lost it and went to go kill him.
Was this documented, or did you get this psychically?
Oh, I got this psychically, but I was able to. She even showed me where she hid the knife. Oh. A few yards down.
This is overlapping with some of the psychic detectives. This was one of your psychic detective cases.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes. I mean, seriously, it was.
Yeah.
Like, I saw where she buried this knife at the base of this big oak tree.
And you're like, do I call the police and have them dig this up? Because it's a murder weapon.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I didn't tell them where the murder weapon was, because I didn't want to look like I was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. But I did contact the police department, and I was trying to inquire to see if there was a murder that did take place. And it was verified. Yes. There was a police officer who had worked the case back in the 1970s who confirmed that, yes, there was a murder that had taken place up there of a Caucasian man. on the property.
Wow.
And I don't think they ever knew who had done it, right?
They didn't have anywhere to begin.
Correct.
I know where the body is buried. I know where the knife's buried. That's
right. Don't know about the body, but,
but you're like,
I know where Mark's...
Then you become a suspect, which is, again, what we talked about in that episode.
Yes.
Why people hesitate.
Right. Because then it's looked at like, oh, well, so you're the killer.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, Mark's another one of my favorites. So, Stone Lion Inn. Let's move forward to there. Guthrie, Oklahoma. One of the characters that were the spirits that I encountered there that was earthbound was a gentleman named Edward. I had first encountered him in the basement. I saw this man in a gray suit, and he was holding up a newspaper and reading it. And I got to talking to him, and he told me that he really liked his cigars, had died of lung cancer, and was brought into the Stone Lion Inn when it was a funeral home. So his energy also felt very heavy, and I knew that he hadn't crossed. And I did get a sense of maybe some fear with him. Like he really didn't have any unfinished business. He just liked hanging out there. Wasn't really interested in crossing over to the other side either.
So he wasn't really in turmoil. He just missed the doorway and just decided to stay?
Pretty much. Yep. He was content being there. So I'll never forget him either. An interesting one.
Right. And the case that OKPRI loves so much. Stone Lion Inn location,
oh, yeah.
too.
That'll always be a favorite place.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so go back and listen to that one.
Yes. So, yeah, we did do a Stone Lion Inn 1 and 2. Mm-hmm. So, moving on, a nasty earthbound spirit, and she was human, was when we were investigating the Lincoln County Memorial Hospital in Guthrie, Oklahoma. I was up on the 3rd floor, and these hospital hallways are about 8 feet apart. And they were made out of big, thick cinder blocks. And as one of the investigators flashed a picture, I saw this young girl come running out of one of the walls, and she just ran straight to me. And the right side of her passed through my right side, and she ran straight, partially through me into the back wall. Now, I guarantee you, if those walls had not been made of cinder blocks but were sheetrock instead, I would have put a hole in it. I'm just saying. I jumped back. Like, it really did take me off guard. But she wasn't a pleasant spirit at all. Her energy was very heavy. She had reddish brown hair, shoulder length, kind of curly. And honestly, her appearance was that of death and decay. She did resemble a little bit of Linda Blair in the movie The Exorcist, as she was fully possessed. That's the best way I can describe her. And I've said before how she haunted me. She'd twist and contort her body. She would snarl at me. I'd see her floating above me when I'm trying to go to bed. I'd see her in the back of my vehicle when I was driving.
Wow.
Not a good spirit. And her energy was very heavy. She did not want help, despite the fact that I was trying to help her. But I definitely knew that she was earthbound. And see, that's the thing. And her story, I guess why I could say why she was so angry at the world, was because she was 7 months pregnant. She was 19, went into this hospital, blacked out, never woke up. So she was mad about dying because she was so young. She was also mad because she didn't know where in the world her baby was.
Yeah.
And
so
she made it her...
several reasons. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Unfinished business in this sense. And all she wanted to do was just toy and play with people to scare them. Not a good spirit at all.
So I wonder if she'd been lingering long enough to then become more negative.
Oh, yeah.
The longer she was earthbound.
Yes, and I do believe that she was one of the ones that the longer she was in spirit, the more she started to hate the living.
Which is something that apparently is a pattern in what you pick up on, because those are one of the theories that you have about spirits that you've mentioned.
Yeah, some of the earthbounds, not all, but some, yes. And then one last case I'm going to mention quickly. This is from an investigation on our website. It's called The Victims Cry. There was this young girl that I had picked up on. Her name was Allison, and she was in her early 20s, and she lived in Louisiana back in the early 1990s. Now, she was Caucasian, had dark brown hair and light eyes. She was of slender build, around 5'5" in height. She was a college student, and one day she was out walking. She was alone, and she had this red handkerchief of some type put over her mouth, and it was almost like I don't know if it was chloroform or whatever it was, but when it went over and she breathed it in, she blacked out. Now, she is showing me this, and this is the thing. Sometimes when spirits show you some things, they can show you from first person, or they can show you from a third person approach. Just depends. So I actually saw some of this happening to her in first person and some of it happening in third person. So this man that had kidnapped her, he was an older man, Caucasian, early 50s. He came up and grabbed her. His build was burly, so, he had the strength to be able to grab her. He had light brown hair, and I could see some of the gray coming in, like around the temples and in other parts. He did have a little bit of a belly on him, but he wasn't like overly obese. And Allison then told me that she remembered waking up and being in the room of this old cabin. And I remember getting the feel of like swampland, almost like what you would see in some of the Louisiana swamps. And here's a warning, a trigger warning about a sexual encounter, but this man repeatedly assaulted her, and then he strangled her. And then he threw her body into the swamp. And I saw her body, her lifeless body, just floating in this murky swamp water. And I saw these little crabs that came up and were picking and eating at her flesh. Now, Allison was very angry at this man. She wanted to know who he was and why he did this to her. She was also very worried about her family. She didn't know how to contact them, and she figured, hey, they're probably really worried about me. She didn't really have a concept of how long she'd also been dead. So these are, and of course, she's earthbound. Energy very heavy. She's still hanging on to these memories. She's still hanging on to these emotions of anger.
I wonder if that's what her thoughts were while she was kidnapped, is my family doesn't know where I am. I'm supposed to be somewhere. And these were the emotions that stuck with her as soon as she died. Like in that moment, she's worried about her family's thinking.
I firmly believe that, yes. And I think these were the last.
What trapped her.
Oh, yes. I believe that all these were those emotions and those thoughts that she was thinking and feeling toward the last parts of her life. So she definitely stayed earthbound. And again, earthbound spirits, they stay earthbound for their own reasons. Like we mentioned above, you don't know that you're dead. Maybe you do know that you're dead, but there's something that ties you and keeps you there.
Right.
Like Allison here, for example, or like Sam, or
He's
Edward.
afraid of what awaits him on the other side.
Exactly. Yes. So different spirits have different reasons for remaining earthbound.
So then, is it up to us as the living to help them to cross over? Is that, some people feel really strongly about not interfering and letting things be as they are.
I guess that would be a matter of opinion on how you want to view that and look at that. But I will tell you that when we go into an investigation, we're not there to remove the spirits or to force them to leave or whatever. But as you also know, if I go into a location and I feel very compelled and I know that the spirit is willing, I will help them cross over.
Right.
And I've
like
done that.
That's ethical. If somebody's asking for help and you deny the help, if you feel you can assist, why wouldn't you help?
Right. And you can't force a spirit to go to the other side if they don't want to. That's the thing.
Right. And that would cause chaos and leave our client with more of a mess than when we walked in.
Right. So if I know a spirit is willing and they want help, I will take the time, especially if I know that spirit is willing to go, I can feel those emotions with them. I would take the time to help them over.
So whether ghosts are spirits or just psychological experiences or even something we don't yet understand, these stories are powerful.
Yeah, especially if they happen to you like they did to me.
Right.
And maybe the biggest question remains that when people see ghosts, are they just remnants of history's past, or are they spirits trapped in this realm, earthbound?
And you can share your own parastories, topic suggestions, and comments to psychic and skeptic, all spelled out, @gmail.com. So you can find us wherever you enjoy your podcasts, and thank you for listening.
Because the paranormal is the normal.
Not yet understood.